Today's AskReddit post. What's a small act of kindness you were once shown that you'll never forget? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. I missed my train to go home for Christmas from uni due to a crash near the station. I was completely broke and knew I wouldn't be able to afford another ticket. Life just got on top of me knowing I'd have to spend Christmas alone in my poopty student house and not being about to see my granddad who was in rapidly declining health. I was bawling my eyes out on the platform when a janitor appeared out of a hidden stock room under a stairwell and brought me some tissues. He found out why I was so upset and said leave it to me. Took me to the customer service desk and got them to reissue me a ticket for the next train home. I was so thankful I started bawling again and he went on his way. Then just before I was about to get my train he found me on the platform and gave me some snacks and a can of Coke, and it's just the nicest thing anyone's ever done for it. I was in NYC taking a lunch break at a job I absolutely hated. I was sitting eating alone at a McD's and after about 15 minutes this man in his 40s or 50s, I'm a 28-year-old male at the time, goes up to me and says something like, "Hey man, you look really sad. Things will get better," and just shook my hand. Takes a lot for one adult man to offer that up to another strange man. Really cheered me up. Moments like that can be so powerful. I had a friend invite me out to dinner once and when I arrived, she just hugged me. I broke down and cried. I'd been struggling with depression for so long and nobody close to me had noticed. But this couple I'd met on holiday and seen a few times since had seen something and took the initiative to ask, "Are you okay?" without having to ask. I broke my foot and was trying to limp my way across campus with crutches in the pouring rain. Someone ran over with their umbrella and walked across campus with me so I wouldn't get rained on. This reminds me of a time in 3rd grade where I had a really messed up leg after an injury resulting in internal bleeding caused by my hemophilia. I was limping across the school grounds when a much older student helped me by picking me up and carrying me all the way to the other side. My story isn't as dramatic, but yours reminded me of it. It was one of the first days of my 6th grade year. I was so tiny and scared of middle school. My class's lockers were by the 8th grade class's lockers. I was struggling to open mine when some huge 8th grader walks up, asked me for the combination, opened it, and just walked away. I was around 19 years old in my first year of community college. My dad has lost his job and my mom was supported my entire family. We were struggling for a while. I remember being in my night class one day starving. I figured there'd be no dinner, so I told myself I'll go straight to bed when I get home and not think about being hungry. When I got home after class, there was a giant box of Costco Pizza on the kitchen counter. Apparently one of our neighbors had bought it for us because my dad fixed a part of her fence a few months back. I think it stuck with me because A, I was so ducking hungry, and B, the chances of her bringing food that night of all nights was insane to me. It might sound so stupid, but I'll never forget it. I bet that pizza tasted so good too. Hunger is the best spice. Alternator died while I was driving home from university. Engine died as I exited the freeway in the middle of the night in a not so pleasant part of town in the days before cell phones. As I'm pushing my car out of the intersection, a guy in a truck comes up and offers to push my car to my neighborhood a good 3 miles away. He does so, and I'm pulling into my neighborhood. He simply gives a wave and drives off into the night. I never even had a chance to thank him. Ones like this always get me a little more, where the person is very obviously just doing it to be a good person. So much so they don't even let you say thanks. In the Jewish religion, anonymous giving is the highest form of giving. I literally coasted into a gas station out of gas on my motorcycle, then realized I didn't have my wallet. Some lady saw me patting all my pockets and that I was upset and offered to fill up my tank. I only let her put $5 in, which on a bike is a lot, but it meant so much to me. I ran out of petrol on my 125 not long after I started riding. Didn't realize I'd go through my reserve as fast as I did. I managed to get a few more miles down the road by laying the bike on its left side to get a few more drops into the carb. but eventually it wouldn't work anymore. I was about to start pushing when a guy pulled up next to me and said, "No fuel?" I said yes and he told me to wait. About 10 minutes later he came back with a jerry can of petrol and poured it in. But before I could offer him anything he said, "Happens to the best of us," and drove off. I assume he was a biker or two and had the same happen to him once. He saved me the trouble of pushing the bike or getting recovered. I wish I knew who he was so I could repay him. After my dad passed away, my depression kicked into overdrive. I went to the doctor and got a prescription for antidepressants. While I was picking up my prescription, I started crying. When I apologized to the pharmacist for crying like a child, the pharmacist said, "You don't have to apologize. You recognize you have a problem and you are trying to fix it. That is a brave thing." It changed my perspective on treating my mental illness. I'm proud of you for getting the help you needed. Hope everything is going well for you. Thank you. Things are going much better now. I transferred in the middle of first grade to a school that did ice cream Fridays, where you'd pay like 50 or 75 cents for whatever kind and then you'd watch an educational video in the classroom. I was unaware of this when the first Friday rolled around, so I didn't have any change and neither did the kid next to me. Normally there would be a few who didn't get ice cream, but this day we were the only two. So the teacher called the both of us aside and gave us each the change required to have our ice cream. I think the biggest thing was that she didn't do it in front of the other kids, so it looked like we had brought the money all along. It was incredibly kind of her. She was a wonderful teacher outside of that as well. TLDR. I and another student didn't have money for ice cream the day everyone else did. The teacher bought us ice cream so we wouldn't be left out. Now that's going above and beyond the call of duty. It was very awesome of her. I took my sister, who's in a wheelchair, to the cinema for the first time on my own. At the end, I realized I could undo the brakes and was blocking everyone. I felt like crying because I thought everyone was pissed at me, but some nice lady helped me, then took me and my sister out. She said she once had a son who needed a wheelchair. This was long ago, but I'll never forget the time my car broke down in the middle of the night and my phone died and I didn't know what to do. A random stranger pulled over and told me we all need a little help sometimes, and I'll never forget her words as she helped me jumpstart my car. As a boy, I developed rheumatic fever and had to stay home for months to work through it and recover. When the lady next door found out how sick I was, she made a big pot of homemade chicken soup. It was delicious and full of healthy, fresh ingredients. To this day, Mom believes that it was this woman's kindness and love she put into her soup making that helped me recover faster. This is so heartwarming. That's such a nice thing to do. One in middle school, my softball team lost a match. A girl from the other team walked over to me and handed me a blue pouch. At first, I couldn't open it, so I said, "Thank you," and walked with my parents to my car. After examining it for a while, I was able to open it and pull out this really cute softball necklace. I still have it to this day. 2. I had to get a spinal fusion surgery for my scoliosis. During my week-long recovery, one of the nurses asked me what my favorite candy was out of the blue. I told her, chocolate. During her next shift, she walked in with a huge tin full of chocolate and a cute stuffed sloth. I still have the sloth. She also put up balloons and a happy birthday sign for my sister who was visiting me. 3. Another nurse cried when I left and hugged me. I was literally astounded by their kindness towards me. I felt really bad that they had to take care of me all the time during my stay, but they really made me feel welcome. Also, my surgery was successful and I'm basically pain-free. When I was in high school, a guy stole my iPod out of my backpack. I didn't think I'd ever get it back. Maybe a week later, a guy I never really talked to came up to me and told me he bought my iPod from that guy and then gave it back to me. He didn't even ask for anything in return. Guess he upgraded to a stolen Zune. Or he stole it and gave it back with a lie. At work, I was complaining about heartburn once. I was still pretty new to the job. Didn't really have any work friends. Felt like an outsider. My life outside of work was pretty poop as well. The bartender on shift overheard me and ran to a nearby coffee shop to get me a chocolate milk. It definitely made the heartburn go away, but it was such a needlessly kind act. I don't think he'll ever forget it. 2 years later we're still friends and she is definitely one of the kindest people I've ever met. Bro, the last part made me smile. That's so lovely to hear. Some people are just so lovely, aren't they? Choking to death on a roadside and a nice guy stopped and did the Heimlich on me. Thanks bro. Holy poop. Choking is one of my worst fears. You were so lucky that guy knew what to do. I was working in a medical field, and after the course of a few days, I worked with 4 members of this family, starting with the dad, who was just an awesome human. Then the next day he came in with his son. Later that afternoon, he came back in with his son again for his daughter's apt. I genuinely fell in love with this family more and more after each member I met. The father, son, daughter attended the mother's appointment with her the next day. At this point, I was considering proposing to the son, as I wanted to be a part of this amazing, hilarious, loving family. I informed them I regretted I wouldn't be there when they came back in 2 weeks, as I was moving on to a different position. They came back an hour later with a nothing but cake, with the sweetest card and an inside joke written on the outside of the cake box. It made me cry. My family life has always sucked, and meeting them was just so beautiful and healing. Edit. Thank you kindly for the award. Did you propose? I worked in bridal for 6 years, which means I was berated by hormonal bridezillas nearly 5 days a week for 6 years. After one particularly awful day at work, I decided to get Chipotle for dinner. I was defeated and exhausted. The girl making my burrito bowl genuinely asked me how I was doing and I nearly lost it. She was the only person to be kind to me all day. I held back tears during my entire transaction. That was about 3 years ago and I think about her kindness often. Please be kind to retail and food workers. Once in high school I was ordering a burrito at Chipotle. The woman assembling my burrito asked if I wanted guacamole. I asked how much it cost. She said $1. I hesitated for a while, trying to decide if guacamole was worth $1 to me, and eventually said no. When she thought I wasn't looking, out of the corner of my eye I saw her add a scoop of guacamole to the burrito. She probably thought I couldn't afford the guac, which wasn't exactly the case, but it still warmed my heart. I was bullied in elementary school and an older boy defended me. He became my first crush and I still remember him. Wholesome F. I recorded a homemade album with my garage band in high school and handed out a few CDs. A few weeks later my English teacher approached me with 5 pages of notes on what he liked and what I could improve on. He apparently got the CD from someone at the high school and listened to it all the way through. It was over an hour long. He didn't know I was a singer and guitar player until he asked the person who gave him the CD. He said that if I ever got a shot in a studio, I would create something amazing. Thank you to all the teachers out there who believe in their students. It makes all the difference to some of us. Your English teacher is amazing. Good for you. Yours, not so much. Sorry, had to. I had just lost my insurance and my epilepsy medication was over $400. The pharmacist got me some coupons that cut the price in half. She didn't have to, and it was against company policy. I now work in a pharmacy in the chain, but she did it anyway. Very nice lady. This makes me smile. I was visiting a friend for his birthday 8 hours away from my home state and got really sick with something. I ended up in the hospital after 2 days of hell. Hospital thankfully was covered by insurance, but the medication I tried to pick up from Walgreens wasn't. The man behind the desk helped me in a similar manner and got the $200 something pills down to $20 something. I was so thankful. After that, I cried in a Sonic parking lot because of his kindness and the fact I was finally feeling better enough to eat for the first time in days. It was just so overwhelming. 3. I'm so glad you got to experience something similar. When I was 10 plus played Little League. When the team won a game, Everyone would go to the dairy barn for an ice cream cone to celebrate. Had a Nazi coach one year who determined that if you didn't play in the game, you didn't get an ice cream. I didn't play one game that we won. I wasn't very good anyway, but still I went to the dairy barn just to hang with my friends. Others usually went home. The lady server asked me what I wanted and I told her that I couldn't have won because I didn't play in the game. She gave me a funny look and went on to the next customer. Later, as we were sitting at the outdoor picnic tables, this same lady came out and gave me a huge ice cream cone. "You're still a winner," she said and walked away. I still choke up a little when I think about it. Fuck that piece of poop coach. Yeah, my sentiments exactly. Asshole. I've shared this story before, but I'll never forget this small act of kindness. When I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1. So I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get, and then decided after I'd gone through them all. One day an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away, and I went back to my piles, able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her, but for me, having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise to never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. This was probably over 20 years ago, but I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. When I was at school, I helped a girl out when she was having a meltdown in the bathroom. A few weeks later, she pretended to be my friend who had been waiting to meet me when I was being followed home by two guys. We never saw each other outside of those two occasions, but I still think about her and hope she's doing okay somewhere out there. Have you tried to see if you could find her? It would be an amazing story. I did try a few months after it happened, but I never knew her full name and nothing turned up with just part of a name. When I was little, I was waiting for my aunt in a supermarket. Whenever someone exited the supermarket, the doors were automatic, so every time someone left, I stood by the doors and pretended to magically open the doors. One person said thank you. I want to be like that person. Riding my bike on a long trip through Canada, with about 50 miles to go, I had a major mechanical failure. Stuck on the side of the road in a foreign country, within 5 minutes at least 10 cars had stopped to check on me. One guy loaded my bike in the back of his truck and drove me 30 miles to the border where I could catch a ferry back to the US. Amazing kindness and generosity toward a stranger. He just asked that I pay it forward, and to date I've helped 5 cyclists who were broken down in honor of that promise. Thumbs up. Canadians are so nice. They don't want anything in return. Just pay it forward. Hey buddy, take my update. I was at a concert and a couple behind me gave me a VIP pass to get a picture with the artist because their friend couldn't come. Never will forget it. Whoa. Talk about generosity. Damn, that's generous. I was trying to fly internationally for the first time to visit a friend in the UK in spring 2010. You know, that year that the volcano erupted and you couldn't fly into or out of Europe for quite some time. I rode up to Chicago on the train not knowing if I was going to have a flight or not. It was just all kinds of extra stress on top of the stress of trying to travel internationally for the first time. Ultimately, I didn't get to go. Flight got cancelled shortly before boarding. The airline gave me my money back and I just hopped the train back home. But the flight was still scheduled when I got to O'Hare, so I checked in and went to sit at the gate. Couldn't eat. Trying to read with a tear-stained face that most people were ignoring. This older couple came and sat right next to me at a time when the waiting area was pretty much empty and simply began a conversation. Husband and wife trying to get home to Amsterdam. Had been stranded in the US for days, but came and talked to me. Didn't acknowledge the state my face was in, but they knew anyway. They didn't have to, and it was some very small kindness after a really rough day. I'll remember those folks and their kind. Distracting conversation for a long time. I had a troubled home life as a young man. The summer before grade 9, I was basically by myself. I needed to get school supplies, and the closest Walmart was miles away. I tried hitchhiking in the August Florida sun, and it sucked. Yuppies in SUVs with Jesus fish kept passing me by. Finally, an old Latino dude in an old busted up sedan offered me a lift. He didn't speak much English, but he did know Walmart. Got me there and tried to give me a couple bucks, which I was too proud to take. Good dude. It seems like, more often than not, it is those with the least who offer the most in those situations. Good on him. My gym teacher purchased me lunch in 3rd grade after I dropped mine. I'm 34 years old and still remember this. My gym teacher embarrassed me in front of the entire grade. I, too, still remember this. When I was in my early 20s, I was pretty broke. I would usually eat at my dad's house when I could get over there, but otherwise it was usually ramen or something else cheap. One of my buddies would come scoop me up and take me to the gas station to get something to drink and then take me to Taco Bell to get some volcano tacos. We'd cruise back to his house and he'd always have a blunt rolled and ready. We'd smoke and eat and he'd bring me back home. He did this every week until I got some money saved up and I could afford my own Taco Bell. He never asked me if I could pay him back and he never expected anything. Thanks Kelso. Now that's a real homie. For real. God bless all the real homies that were there for us when we were hella broke. Hell yeah man. I've posted this before but I had finally decided to get out of my abusive home. I went to my college's financial aid office to see if I could qualify for a dorm. I was $50 short. I remember looking at the ground trying not to cry. I had finally gotten the courage up to leave and I still couldn't do it. The financial aid lady touched my shoulder, looked me in the eyes and said, "I believe you." It was the first time anyone had flat out said they believed I was being abused. She took out her own credit card and paid the last $50. She went with me to sign the lease and to get the key to my dorm. I stood with the key in my hand and realized I was getting out. I was going to be free. I broke down. She hugged me and told me to pay it forward eventually. I have no idea what her name is, but to the woman at Dixie College who took a chance on me, thank you. I pay it forward by speaking at therapy groups about how to choose not to be a victim and by sponsoring those who are in similar living situations as I was. Totally tearing up at your story. I was around 6 years old and went out to ride my bike. My parents were behind me walking and I was going ahead and coming back to them every 5-10 minutes, but I forgot to turn around and realized I am lost, so I started crying after some unsuccessful attempts to find them. One kind man, probably in his 60s, stopped and asked me multiple questions about what happened and who were my parents. It turned out that he knew my grandpa. He contacted him, got my parents' numbers and called them. They decided where to meet and after 20 minutes we were there. I was so happy and relieved and thanked the old man. He lives in the block of flats as my grandpa and I sometimes help him by carrying the groceries or fixing something in his house. I would never forget this act, because things could have gone wrong for me. Now you have a friend for years and memories for a lifetime. When I was a lad, about 14 or 15, I was rushing home to make my curfew. My bike wheel slipped sideways and I crashed my bike quite badly and messed myself up a bit. My wedding tackle got the full crossbar treatment. I gashed my elbow and took a blow to the head. These were the days before helmets. A random couple picked me up and collected up my bike. Went to a phone box and called a taxi for me. Then paid for the taxi to take me the remaining 5 miles or so home. My parents went from "what times do you call this" to "you're going to hospital" in a heartbeat. It turns out my injuries weren't too bad. But without random strangers, I've no idea how long I'd have been, say, at the side of the road before I started the walk home. Thank you, random strangers. I told my co-worker I just really missed home and most of all, a home-cooked meal. I was 19 and moved away from home for the first time to a big city for a job opportunity. I'd never been away from my mom before, or even been alone for longer than like 2 weeks. I could cook basically nothing and everything I did was just missing something. so mostly lived off takeout and microwave meals, which I was starting to get really sick of. I just wanted a nice meal made with love and fresh ingredients. Anyway, I told my co-worker that, and the next day she came in with 5 homemade meals in containers for me to eat for the next week. The day before, she conjured up a conversation about allergies, which I didn't even think was anything more than a usual conversation. Until the next day, it made me cry, and she didn't understand why I was so overwhelmed and surprised, because it was just something she did every day but for her own kids. I don't think I will ever forget it. It was truly just so sweet, and the meals were so good, so comforting. Truly tasted like they were just made by the hands of loving parent. A random lady bought my chocolate bar and my soda after my card didn't work because it was the wrong company and the register was glitching. So I went out and she came after me and gave me my stuff. I was so surprised. That is so sweet. Yep, she was really nice. I think this was about 6-7 years ago when I was in 6th or 7th grade. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.